day that should have brought peace. But didn't what if the day meant to bring us closest to God now haunts us? A day once dedicated to rest, prayer, and sacred silence, now tangled in dread, discomfort, even mockery. They called it God's Day. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Black Sabbath didn't invent the fear. They just gave it a sound. Join me as we uncover what really happened when the sacred rhythm of Sabbath turned into a dissonant echo of fear in our culture, our music, and our minds. Can something created for joy become a source of dread? In the beginning, God didn't command. He simply rested. On the seventh day, he stopped, not in fatigue, but in fulfillment. He blessed it. He sanctified it. He gave humanity its first sacred rhythm. Work, then wonder, labor, then delight, create, then commune. To the ancient Israelites, the Sabbath was more than a break. It was identity. It was the sign of their covenant with God, a rhythm of rest echoing from Sinai to every generation. To early Christians, it became something more, Resurrection Day, a weekly reminder that death had lost and a new creation had begun. But somewhere along the centuries, the rhythm broke, regulations crept in, the joy faded. By the Middle Ages, Sabbath wasn't a feast, it was a burden, a day wrapped in fear instead of freedom. People feared missing Mass, feared working by accident, feared judgment, not joy. The day of God had become a day you treaded carefully, not a garden of peace, but a courtroom of guilt. And somewhere along the way, we stopped resting. We started performing. Then came the modern world. Factories replaced fields, alarms replaced birdsong, and the soul became a machine. In post-war England, the air was thick with smoke, survival, and silent confusion. Faith felt cold, churches felt distant, God absent. Out of this tension, Black Sabbath was born, not in chapels, but in concrete, not through doctrine, but through distortion. They weren't trying to mock the sacred, they were trying to find it again. In the ruins, in their haunting debut, the church bell tolls, thunder cracks, and the voice cries out, "What is this that stands before me?" The horror isn't a devil, it's emptiness, a world without meaning, a God who doesn't speak, a Sabbath that no longer sings. Their music was not rebellion, it was recognition, that we still keep holy days, but forget why they're holy. And maybe, in our headphones and deadlines, in our podcasts and playlists, we do the same. We fear stopping long enough to hear what's missing inside us, so we scroll, we stream, we fill every silence. Because silence might remind us that even God's day feels hollow. But what if the darkest Sabbath isn't on a calendar? What if the true Black Sabbath is the moment when the soul forgets how to rest, or worse, no longer wants to? Can something created for joy become the doorway to dread? Maybe Sabbath was never just a day. Maybe it was a window, and we closed it. There was a time when the Sabbath was sacred, a breath of Eden, a divine pause, not for bodies, but for hearts lost in endless striving. It was never just a day off, it was a gift, a rhythm written into creation, a whisper every 7 days, "You are not a machine, you are mine." But then, delight became duty, joy, just rules, the gift, a cage. By the Middle Ages, the Sabbath had morphed into something unrecognizable, not celebration, but surveillance, not rest, but religious rigor. And in that suffocating stillness, fear crept in. What if I break the rules? What if I'm not holy enough? What if God isn't resting, but watching? And when fear replaces delight, we don't just lose a ritual. We lose rest. We lose silence. We lose soul. Into that silence, came Black Sabbath. Their music didn't summon darkness, it gave voice to the silence we refused to hear. What is this that stands before me? Their first line. A question, a cry, not mockery, but mourning. They weren't ridiculing the sacred, they were grieving its absence. The Sabbath, once a sacred rhythm, had become superstition, and in a world that had lost its rest, they turned distortion into lament. After forever asked what few dared to say out loud, could it be you're afraid of what your friends might say if they knew you believe in God above? That's not rebellion. That's the ache of a generation raised on rituals, but starving for relationship. Lord of this world isn't blasphemy, it's a mirror. It doesn't accuse God, it accuses us. You made him a throne of lies. A sobering line, not hate speech, but heartbreak. These weren't just metal anthems. They were modern psalms, cracked with distortion, heavy with grief. And the most haunting truth? Black Sabbath didn't curse the Sabbath. They stood in its graveyard and sang the grief we couldn't name. Because when we abandon the Sabbath, the sacred canopy collapses. The sky goes silent, and our souls, no longer anchored, begin to drift. We binge, we scroll, we drown in noise. And still, we can't breathe. That's the rebellion Black Sabbath revealed, not against holiness, but against a hollow religion that forgot how to rest. So maybe the real crisis isn't that people are running from God. Maybe they're just exhausted. Maybe the Sabbath didn't fail us. Maybe we forgot what it was for. And maybe, just maybe, Black Sabbath heard the silence before the rest of us did. The Sabbath was never meant to haunt us. It was meant to hold us. A sanctuary in time, a divine rhythm where the soul could finally exhale. But somewhere along the centuries, we forgot the melody and remembered only the silence. We turned rest into rules, and fear crept in like a shadow at noon. But the truth remains, unchanged, unshaken. The Sabbath was never a chain to bind, but a gift to free. Not a threat to fear, but a door, wide open to step through. A door that whispers, you are not what you produce. You are not the sum of your noise. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. To return to the Sabbath, we don't need more striving. We need surrender. To stop hiding behind busyness. To stop obeying out of guilt. To start trusting the one who rested first and still invites us to join him. So maybe the real question isn't, is the Sabbath still required? But is it still calling? And more hauntingly, are we still listening? Because in a world addicted to hurry, maybe the holiest rebellion left is simply to be still.